Hi everyone, welcome to MacMind.io. My name is Johnny Mac. I'm a software professional and the host of this channel. Thank you for tuning in to check out this video. Really excited to share with you today about how to add a splash screen to your custom Raspberry Pi image so it doesn't show any console output when it boots. Be sure to watch all the way through to the end where I'll share how to display an animation on that splash screen. But first, why would you want to show a splash screen on your device? What's the use case for this, and isn't this a trivial thing? Suppose you're building a retail device that customers are going to hold in their hand, or it has a visible display as part of the product. Maybe it's an automobile infotainment unit or a single app tablet device for a hospital worker. In that case, you don't want a screen of text output showing when the device turns on. They're going to have to see that happen, especially in a car. It's turning off and on a lot. It's not like a kiosk that maybe you just turn it on once and it boots up. It's going to be something that the customer is going to have to see. And you don't want them to be seeing that console output every time. It's not very polished, and it may also raise concerns that the device is having issues to a regular user that doesn't expect that. It's a small thing, but it can go a long way for your brand and customer satisfaction. Now, you may also think this is a trivial exercise. How hard can this be? Once we have the solution, it's not that hard, but the goal here is to save you some time and help you figure out all the details so you know what to do. I've made a few videos now and demonstrated how we can use rpi-image-gen to build highly customized images for the Raspberry Pi. And if we look here at the rpi-image-gen documentation, we see that it makes reference to something called initramfs. And we see it here mentioned in this section on root file system construction. And we see a reference here to a hook that runs update initramfs. Okay, and then later there's a whole nother section here about initramfs and using initramfs tools and how you can overwrite or add content to initramfs tools. Okay, so why is this important, and why is this something that we need to worry about if we're going to be implementing a splash screen? If we want to know more, we need to look into what initramfs is, and essentially it is a root file system image used for booting the kernel provided as a compressed archive. And so this is significant because essentially what's happening here is when the device boots, it's going to uncompress this archive, and then it's going to load that into memory, and it's going to run the code that's there first, okay? And so anything that's not included in that archive is not going to be considered. And so if we want to show a splash screen, we need to make sure that we have the capabilities included in that archive. And so when we take a look at the code, starting with the build script, we see here where we're generating our rootfs, there's going to be a couple calls here to the setup hook, the essential hook, and the customize hook. And the way this works is there's this bin runner, and rpi-image-gen is going to essentially scan through these directories, which are going to be your external IG image, external IG device if you provide one. If not, it'll just be that top level device and image directory, and look for files that are prefixed with setup or essential or customize and run those scripts for you. And then finally, it's going to go ahead and source from the top level directory the scripts that are included. And when we look a little closer there, sure enough, there is one called customize 10 initramfs. And this is where rpi-image-gen is going to make a copy of anything that you have in your device initramfs tools, as it said it would in the README. But also here, it's going to make a backup of your initramfs conf file. It's going to then overwrite this one configuration parameter to ensure update all ramfs is set to all. And finally, it's going to run update initramfs, and then it's going to write back that backup file. And this is where that compressed archive is being built. So how again does this play a role in what we're trying to do? If we're going to show a splash image, we need to make sure that everything that we want to show, including potentially a image file and any code that we need or utilities to render that image file out, is included in this archive, and rpi-image-gen needs to know about it before this command runs. And that's important. And that's what we're going to figure out how to do, and that's why we want to know about initramfs. Fortunately, there's a great utility that's been developed for exactly this task. It's called Plymouth, which I interpret to be some reference to Plymouth, Massachusetts, where the Pilgrims landed in 1620 and booted a new settlement. I haven't verified that. I don't know, maybe it's a reference to Plymouth, England, or some other Plymouth somewhere. I'm always intrigued by the names of some of these utilities. Either way, it's designed exactly for our purpose, which is to render an image or set of images during the initramfs part of the boot phase. And it's available as a Debian package that we can add to our RPI image customizations so it's installed automatically. There's also an additional package called Plymouth Themes, which we'll need to ensure we can add a custom logo for our display. Installing Plymouth along with the themes, very straightforward on a Debian system, which is what a 64-bit Raspberry Pi OS is based on. However, it's not as simple as just installing the packages and then setting some config in a post-build script. As I mentioned earlier, we want to run this as part of the initial boot, and we need to make sure it's included in that initramfs archive, which rpi-image-gen runs as part of the rootfs generation. So that's what makes this slightly more complicated and why I hope to save you some time with this video. Okay, so let's get into how to do this then. And if you're familiar with some of my videos, you're familiar with how to set up and structure a project to build an image with rpi-image-gen. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and just bootstrap a project that is essentially going to be the structure to build the default image, and then we'll go ahead and make some customizations so that we can have our splash screen using Plymouth. And so you can see we were able to build an image, which is essentially the default image from the top level, just copying over that top level image directory, making a few customizations, which included the MacMind user, and build that image. So now we'll go ahead and see if we can customize that to get our Plymouth theme installed and show our logo at boot on the device. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop back into our code. And if we take a look at our project here, let's go ahead and add a customizations.yaml. And then we're going to want to make sure our profile references this. And I've had success adding this here, so it runs before some of these RPI layers. And what do we want to do here is we want to make sure that we're installing the Plymouth and Plymouth themes packages. And that's really all we're trying to achieve here. Okay, great. And so next what we want to do is we want to locate in our image directory, again, we're using the MBR simple dual image layout here. And we see this bdeb strap directory with a single customize script. This is, again, sourced from the root image directory in the rpi-image-gen project. So this is essentially the default image that rpi-image-gen builds. This is a customized script that's included there. And this is where we're going to want to include the logic to make sure that Plymouth and our theme is included before update initramfs runs. And so let's go ahead and start out. We're just going to create a customize splash script here. And what this is going to do is this is going to configure the splash screen. Okay, and so the first part of that is we're just going to make a new directory and set some permissions on that in the standard path that Plymouth is going to be looking for themes. And that is in the user share Plymouth themes directory. We're just going to create a new directory called MacMineSplash and make sure that the permissions are set. And next what we're going to do is we're going to create a directory in our MBR simple dual image layout. And we're just going to call this MacMineSplash theme. And what we want to do here is we want to include a MacMineSplash.plymouth file as well as a MacMineSplash.script file. And this is where we're going to write a small script to set the image that is going to be displayed on the device. So the way this works is Plymouth has some configuration, and this is pretty straightforward. So it's going to look something like this. We can specify our theme name, give it a description. We're going to go ahead and specify a module name, which is going to be script. And that's going to reference here. And we're going to indicate that we have an image directory that we can then use as a reference in our script. And our script file is going to be located at this location. Okay, so now we're going to write that script. And this is pretty straightforward also. We're going to go ahead and initialize an image. We're going to call that image MacMineLogo.png. And then we're going to initialize a sprite. And then finally, we're just going to go ahead and set the image on the sprite and then make sure it's located at the center of the screen. Okay. And if you want to learn more about how to write scripts for Plymouth, there are some really good resources and we can show you those here. So if we look at, this is one here on the Arch Linux wiki, and this is going to give you some nice information on Plymouth and how it works with various different distributions and archive tools. And how to change to different themes, installing new themes, okay? But if you want to know about how to write the scripts themselves, there's a great resource here on freedesktop.org wiki, and this is going to be a nice guide. This is probably the most comprehensive overview of Plymouth scripts that I was able to find. And the other resource is here in this ADI 1090X GitHub repo called Plymouth Themes. And there's just lots of themes here with examples of different scripts. So those are two nice resources that you can use if you want to learn how to customize your scripts further. For now, we're just making this simple script, and we're going to reference our MacMineLogo.png, and then we just want to make sure that logo is in the directory that we've indicated here in our Plymouth script, which is that same MacMineSplash directory. So we can go ahead and drop a logo in there, and now we have our logo file. So when we come back to our customized splash script, we want to make sure now that we're copying over these files into the rootfs so that rpi-image-gen can then include them when it runs update initramfs to create that initramfs archive that's going to be extracted and run when the device boots. So we are going to go ahead and use our sync for that, and we can copy these three files with our sync. You could probably copy the whole directory in one command, but we're just going to, for the purposes of this tutorial, copy each file individually. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we set permissions on the files that we just copied, and that we run this Plymouth set default theme. So now Plymouth knows that MacMind Splash is going to be the default theme. So again, when update initramfs runs, it'll pick up this configuration and it'll know that this is the default theme. Okay, great. So one more thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go ahead and set some kernel parameters so that our Raspberry Pi kernel knows that we want to run the Splash, and we're going to run in silent boot, and we want to turn off the log level. And so we're going to set these parameters here in our device command line.txt. We're going to set quiet, splash, and set the log level to 0. Okay, and now we ought to be able to go ahead and build our image. And when we then boot our device, we should see the logo displayed. Okay, so we've installed the image on our USB drive, and we're going to go ahead and pop that into the Raspberry Pi. And we can do that. And now we're going to see if when we boot this, do we see our logo? Here we go. And it is booting. And there we see the logo. And now we're prompting to log in. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, so as promised, let's see if we can get an animation working on the splash screen next. And I admit I was a little ambitious. I was going to try and get an animation of the MacMind logo to render out, but I haven't been able to generate that animation. I'm working on that, and in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll use an existing animation from the Plymouth themes. And so I showed you this a little earlier. This is a project with lots of themes. This is a great resource for you to learn how to use Plymouth to generate your own animations and see how Plymouth scripting syntax works and the different features there. And again, you can see some really cool animations, a big collection of Plymouth themes ported from Android boot animation, and just a lot of great resources here. So what I'm going to do is see if we can get this one called blockchain. Some of you may have recognized I have some other videos in this area. It's an area of interest for me as well, and an area that I'm growing in my expertise on. And this is a tribute to that. So this is the blockchain animation, and let's see if we can get this running on our Raspberry Pi as the boot splash animation. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're just going to go ahead and clone this repository. And so we'll come back here to our code. And what we can do here is just clone this. And we should see it appear here. And that's going to come down to our local machine. And once that's done, what we can do then is we're just going to wholesale copy what we want to run as the theme, right? So we can locate the blockchain theme here, and we're just going to go ahead and copy that here into our image layout. So we're just going to drop that in right there, just right next to our MacMind Splash theme. Okay, simple. And now we can go ahead and take a look at this, and we see we have our Plymouth config. And this looks familiar, right? Similar to the config that we set up for our MacMind Splash. And that has a name and a description and a comment. This module name script referencing this here, which includes the image-dir and the script file. And then we can see the script here, which is authored by Aditya Shakya, Adi1096 on GitHub and Reddit, Adi1090x. And look at this code, it's fantastic, really well organized and commented. And you love to see this from an open source contributor. So it's very easy to follow and learn here. And we see here this interesting refresh callback, and that's going to be set as the refresh function. And if we come here and look at the docs that I had showed you earlier from this freedesktop.org Plymouth scripts, we can look up this refresh function, right? So calling Plymouth set refresh function with a function will set that function to be called up to 50 times per second. And that is a clue here as to how this is working, right? So what's happening, and you see all these PNGs, the way this is working is the screen is just going to update with a new PNG so many times per second, such that it looks like continuous motion, right? That's how this works. There's no MOV file to render that you'll need to include, right? You're just going to have a number of static images, and then you're just going to update the screen frequently enough that it looks like an animation. So that's cool, and we can see here some other code, and you can study this and get to know how Plymouth scripting is working. But for our sake, what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and we're going to update now our customized splash script. And instead of configuring the MacMine splash, we're going to configure a blockchain splash. We're just going to call it blockchain. We're going to keep the theme name. We could theoretically rename the theme here, but we're not going to do that for simplicity. And then instead of copying over each file one by one, considering how many PNGs there are here, let's just instead copy this entire directory. And so we're just going to copy that over here to the themes, and we're going to do that with rsync-a. And if we have that, we're no longer going to need to copy each file individually. And then what we'll do is we will just update the permissions, and then we'll tell Plymouth to set this as the default theme. And with those settings, we ought to be able to see this working the way that we expect it to. And so we'll go ahead and see if it does in fact work. So I'll build this image and put it on the device and see if we see that animation. And that's done. So let's go ahead and see if we pop it in again to our Pi here. Let's see what happens. Here we go. Okay. And here we can see. Okay. There it is. Cool, huh? Awesome. So that's it for this video. Thanks for tuning in today to learn how to add a splash screen to your custom Raspberry Pi image to display on boot. If you like this or it was helpful for you, please tap that thumbs up icon. It would really help me out, and it gives others a chance to view this content. Do you have any thoughts? Please share them in the comments section. Other topics you want to hear about, I'd love to hear from you. And please consider subscribing to this channel. I'm going to be making more videos on building custom Raspberry Pi images to get the most out of your Pi hardware, as well as videos on blockchain and AI topics. I hope you're having a great day, and remember, don't stop experimenting, challenging assumptions, and seeking the objective truth. I'm Johnny Mac. This is MacMine.io.